I wish that I could be there with you in Siwa, but as that isn't possible, I hope I can give you a brief overview and some understanding of cultural and design elements that I have observed and learnt about in my time there. My first visit to Siwa was in 1995. Few tourists came to Siwa then. There were a few hotels and restaurants, but nowhere near the numbers of visitors that the Oasis has seen in the last few years. I loved Siwa from my first visit and was determined to return. It's a long trip from Australia to Cairo and then the bus through the desert. Each visit I fell more in love with the place and the people, and in 2010 I moved there to live. Life changes meant I only lived just over a year here, a year of simple living but rich in learning. My knowledge of Siwa is not that of an academic, although design is my field of academic study. Instead, my knowledge is based on observation and reading. But I hope it gives you an introduction that encourages you to look more deeply into the culture and traditions of Siwa. In this remote region of the Sahara, Siwa has archaeological treasures that show its long history as part of trade routes going back to the Pharaonic and Ptolemaic eras. Siwa has been occupied since at least the first millennium BC. Since the 14th and 15th centuries, or even earlier, a Berber people have lived in the oasis. Until the late 20th century, Siwa was more isolated and developed a distinct culture including its own language, mud salt architecture, cooking, decorative and other traditions. It does have some familiarities with cultures of Libya and other places that Siwan people came into contact with through trade, but its relative isolation meant that the culture maintained definite differences. Many factors influence architecture, crafts and dress. The natural environment includes geographical and climate factors, while the human-made built environment includes the historical, social, cultural, religious, political and economic influences. All of these elements influence the local architecture and clothing especially. The architecture and crafts of Siwa have clear artistic spiritual links with the environment. Many of us have lost interconnection and harmony with elements around us, and we feel a gap in our lives. For me, that is one of the appeals of the traditional earth architecture of Siwa, the use of palms and clay to make household objects, and the embroidery motifs of the clothes of the women. Many of you are here specifically with an interest in architecture and in what makes the architecture of Siwa distinctive. I hope that you get a chance while in Siwa to watch construction using traditional methods. Apologies for the lack of quality video, but here is a short view of construction in process at the temple site near Ogurmi. I wish to thank the Siwa builders who allowed me to video them at work.
انت المستفيدين ايش المستفيدين؟ ايوه انت مستفيد انتم يعني. ولا لا 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 تنظم ها؟ لا تنظم المنظر ده ها؟ استفادة تشكيل يعني ولا 100 لا وكان قاعد نخدم اني قاعد نطوين اثنين وخلاص ولا الله ينور فعلا يعني يبوك الوضع كلام مني شيء دائما اعمل اداء ولا نخدم مني نخدم يعني مطار حاله نغت يعني شي يمسوا قال طيبين عندي مخاوية اسوي شي قروش كثر حاجه القروش المفروض يعني بس نتنك المدنه انا خلي بالك اما ما يوجد طارس السوق كيس المدنه نسي وين كما واحد سلطني السين كمية الصور بحمزه ولا ايش بينو هذه ليش كليله سلطني ولا ما من يمحن يعني سلطن حطها الفيديو وهن قل مربوع عن شال هدي الصورة الفيديو في سيوان ما عاش مبعلوت ما عاش مبلا وتفلسني بعد
The traditional building materials of Siwa are earth, salt, palm wood and olive wood. How these were used is most evident in Old Charlie, the fortress town above the modern town, and also in some older homes built on the flat land below. Many homes in Old Charlie were abandoned. Their owners moved to the lower flatland and increasingly wanted homes that withstood the elements and had running water and modern appliances. Kashif is a hardened mix of sodium and potassium chloride and also quartz and calcite particles that occur at the shore of salt lakes as the water evaporates. Slabs and blocks are mined at the lakes and taken to construction sites, where they are assembled into walls up to 2 metres thick. A mud mortar is made to bind the kashif fragments. This mortar is different from usual mud mortars because it hardens not only through drying, but also through the crystallisation of sodium chloride into a rigid matrix that binds the blocks together. Buildings made with this technique are cooler in summer and warmer in winter. However, the walls can be brittle and fissures occur, which, if not sealed, can weaken the building. As with anywhere, styles and preferences in architecture change. There was a turnaround as the aesthetic value and simplicity of the old construction methods became recognised and valued again. The natural materials and techniques started to be used more for hotels, homes, and even for official buildings such as the bank. In some cases now, an entire home or wall is made this way. But there are also many examples where the technique is used only as the facade on buildings which were made from brick, concrete, and other materials. The traditional building methods were, in their time, affordable and sustainable for the people these homes were made for, drawing on materials that were readily available, but maintaining them takes considerable effort. Construction from natural and sustainable materials is more appealing to me, both out of respect for the environment and aesthetics, but not everyone would wish to live that way. Windows are set high for both air circulation and for privacy. When possible, there is a reception room for male visitors, so the women do not need to cover as they go about their lives. If the home is in a garden, male guests may be entertained outside. If you don't get a chance to enter a traditional home, you can get a good idea of what they are like from the Siwa House Museum in town, which displays household objects and dress, including examples of what I'll describe. Some architecture students interested in sustainable building and architecture have based projects around the potential for contemporary designs that incorporate traditional techniques and honour the environment of Siwa. You can find some of these examples online. Dress and adornment in Siwa evolves just as it does anywhere, although perhaps it has been at a slower pace than in the external world in the past. It is respectful not to photograph the women of Siwa. The photographs I'll be showing you were taken mostly by other people, and I use them just to show you how you may see the women dressed in public. As it is not usual for Siwa women to uncover their faces in public, many of the women you see in the photos online wearing Siwa dress will not actually be Siwan. Many tourists now put on the bridal garments, especially for photos. Also, some of the Siwa girls are now dressed in the traditional clothes for touristic events such as the Date Festival and opening of restored historic sites. Dress is a mobile identity, just as architecture, furniture, and other practical household items are identities of a certain place and time. In Siwa, the societal preference for modesty and privacy are evident both in dress and in the structure of the homes. Siwa has a unique embroidery tradition, although its motifs have some similarities to those used in other cultures. I suggest anyone interested in the garments and adornment of Siwa read the excellent book by Margaret Vale, Siwa, Jewellery, Costume and Life in an Egyptian Oasis. This will give you far more detailed information than I can in this talk. Most of the embroidery traditionally done by the women was on the multiple wedding garments of brides and on the large shawls which the women wear outside of their homes. You will see examples of this for sale in the stores in Siwa, and also see how the motifs have been adapted and are used on many more products that are produced specifically for tourists. Traditional colours of the embroidery are black, green, orange, red and yellow. More recently, sequins and brightly coloured synthetic thread has made the embroidery more elaborate. Until the last quarter of the 20th century, a basic bridal outfit consisted of decorative trousers, various dresses, head and body coverings and shoes. Most of the bridal garments and related items were made and embroidered by the bride's mother and the girl herself, and by other female family members. In addition to clothing, coal pot holders were decorated with embroidery. As everyday wear outside the home, a Siwa woman will put on a head shawl, and over this is worn a large rectangle made of blue and white cotton and embroidered with nylon thread. It was traditionally embroidered in silk. For many years, the blue and white material has been imported from the village of Kadassa near Cairo and embroidered in Siwa. Until the 1920s, the caravan route between Cairo and Siwa started at Kadassa. A black face veil is tied over the head shawl. Younger women now often prefer the black Islamic face veil under their outer shawl. If you pass women in the street holding the shawl across their face and you are female, they may open it slightly and acknowledge you. It is kept closed when there are men present. While many of the products now sold to tourists and made for Cairo-based clothing labels employ Siwa women to embroider, some have been embroidered in projects where the women are not from Siwa but from other areas of Egypt or are refugees from outside of Egypt and have been taught the Siwa techniques. Some European designers have also employed Siwa women to add embroidery to their fashion collections. Of concern is the outright appropriation of traditional Siwa embroidery with no credit and possibly no payment for the work and artistry of the Siwa women. The most infamous example of this was a dress by designer label Chloe, which was worn by musician Adele in a concert. Cultural appropriation is something I hope you will keep in mind as you explore Siwa and think about how you go about being inspired or incorporating in your designs any of the ideas or motifs from Siwan architecture, clothing and crafts. Siwans celebrate the usual Muslim feasts, and in addition a unique event of several days and nights around the harvest time at full moon in October. Men and children gather at Gebel Dakrur, where communal meals are cooked and eaten. This tradition began as a commemoration of the end of disputes between the Siwans and as a signifier of peace in the oasis. Prayers and storytelling are integral to this, especially in the evenings. On the morning of the fourth day, some of the men walk in procession back to town and honour the Saint Sidi Suleiman at the central mosque. The sense of community and the spiritual significance of this gathering I found deeply moving, and although now the days have become more of a fun fair for the children, the significance remains and the evening prayer circle is especially moving. For the religious feasts, weddings and other significant events, including the annual Harvest Peace Festival, girls wear elaborate dresses in vibrant colours. These are decorated with lace and other trims. These dresses shine like gems as the girls move through the sand-coloured landscape, and sometimes a family will dress all the girls of different ages in one colour. Some of the girls wear other clothes, not different to styles children in the big cities wear, but they always aim to look their best for celebrations, with braided hair or groomed hair and pretty accessories. Now more of the older girls or young women who attend the festival wear the black dresses and head cover typical in many areas of Egypt and not unique to Siwa. As times change, the influence of styles from outside the oasis has increased. The girls traditionally wear red ribbons, sometimes other colours, in their hair. Hadi Hamid explained to me that choosing red, yellow, green and brown, it's a tradition in Siwa, referring to ripening stages of dates. Also, we can notice these colours on traditional handmade women's dresses and scarves. That was my grandmother's answer to the same question 25 years ago, he said. Siwa is also known for the artistry of its silversmiths and the jewellery they made for the women. The jewellery has not only decorative intrinsic value, it also had a spiritually protective function, and this may include protection for health or fertility. The purity of silver was highly valued. You can see examples in the Siwa House Museum and also in the stores here. More jewellery was worn for special occasions than as everyday adornment, and multiple pieces of silver and beads were worn together. From religious feast celebrations to marriages and births, there were many occasions for women to wear their jewellery. A married woman would wear a round torque, silver and bead necklaces, several large hoop earrings which may be suspended from a red leather headband. She would have sets of bangles, rings and hair ornaments. Older women usually wore less jewellery or amulets, most usually the torque, smaller bangles and earrings. Jewellery was kept in a wooden chest or a decorated basket. A woman received most of her jewellery at marriage, and it was her property. She would have a mix of older and newer pieces, some given later by her husband, some inherited from her mother or grandmother, and perhaps she bought some herself. The local silversmiths used consistent styles, so the older and new pieces looked good together. Decoration incorporates symbols similar to those used by Berber people across North Africa. As with the embroidery, the motifs draw on what can be seen in the oasis and surrounding desert. If you take some time to look at a variety of pieces, you may see 6 or 8 pointed stars, rosettes and flowers, palms, crosses, circles, almond shapes, eyebrows, zigzags, triangles, diamonds. You will also see representations of fish, birds, snakes. Men did not usually wear jewellery, but did wear amulets. Pottery is another craft that has been important here, especially before the increased reliance on metals and plastics. Clay was important in everyday Siwa life in the form of vessels for cooking and for household objects such as incense burners, and also for the construction of the ovens for baking. Ovens in homes are not built to be moved, and so there are smaller ovens made which are portable and can be taken from the home to the gardens if the family was intending to spend more than a few hours there. Now families may take a single gas burner cylinder for cooking and tea making if they go beyond home, but the clay ovens are still made. Palm baskets and platters are made throughout Egypt. They're examples from ancient Egypt in many museum collections, but you will notice some differences in the styles of baskets made in Siwa. Larger baskets were used to transport and store fruit and vegetables. The smaller baskets were decorated and used for storage. Both are still made, but you don't see them in homes as much as in the past. Again, mass-produced items not of natural local materials have largely replaced the handmade ones. I still use Siwa baskets in my home as I prefer them to plastic. Wedding chests of wood are still made in Siwa, although the style of decoration has changed across generations. Palm leaf is also used extensively for making fences and shelters, and you will see these throughout Siwa. Palm midribs are used for making furniture, although in homes, sitting and eating on the floor and on cushions is often preferred to chairs, couches and high tables. The date palm is of course not only used in building and crafts. Dates and olives are Siwa's main crops and essential in traditional Siwan cooking. There are many dishes that include dates that you will only find in Siwa. While you may not get to try these in a brief visit, if you are interested in food culture, there is a book on this. Different types of dates and date products you will find in the stores, and the Siwa men will often enthusiastically talk to you about date palm cultivation. You may also see an old manual olive press during your visit. These traditional presses were driven by a donkey. Olives were ground, then pressed, and the oil filtered. The oil cake left after oil extraction makes a nutritious animal feed. You will now find various olive products sold in Siwa, including olive jam. As the interest in sustainable tourism has become increased, other local agricultural produce such as Siwa mint and kirkuk. You will see many examples of rock salt carving in the stores here, from simple candle holders to more elaborate sculptures. This is a more recently developed craft, making use of the available natural materials. Salt windows and light features add to the aesthetic wholeness of many hotels and homes that are built using traditional techniques. To close, some thoughts on cultural appropriation. Possibly, like me, you will fall in love with the architectural and cultural traditions of Siwa and want to use elements of these in your own designs. Please be aware of the fine line between developing an understanding of people and their culture and simply taking their culture and imitating it. Cultural appropriation has been defined as taking from a culture that is not one's own intellectual property, cultural expressions and artefacts, history and ways of knowledge. I hope as you explore Siwa cultural traditions and think about how these may inspire your own design, that you will ask yourself, is what I am designing collaborative or exploitative? You will hopefully get to know some of the people and they can tell you far better than I can about their traditions. Because ultimately, just like you, I am an outsider, despite visiting over many years and previously living here. Please take the opportunity to get to know people, not just be a voyeur in this beautiful oasis. Ask yourself, would the movement of ideas and images have mutual benefits to your world and that of the people here? It is important to recognise in whatever you design, in an authentic and respectful way, the culture that you are sourcing from. As outsiders, we should aim in design not to erase the people that methods and ideas came from, but to credit their culture appropriately. Approach your exploration of Siwa with respect, and I'm sure you will be rewarded with fresh inspiration and positive outcomes in your work. Enjoy your time in Siwa.